And our next speaker, I'm sure I don't have to introduce Barbara to most of you. Barbara Thiers is going to talk about the Herbarium project and the digitalization of all the fungal records.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you today. I'm going to tell you about a project which is exactly 2 weeks old called the Macrofungi Collections Consortium. The subtitle is Unlocking a Biodiversity Resource for Understanding Biotic Interactions, Nutrient Cycling, and Human Affairs. It was suggested to me by one of the co-PIs that this was a pretty grandiose title, but I figured, you know, go big or go home. And we didn't go home. We came away with $3.8 million to spend over the next few years on a project whose goal is to build an enduring alliance of the U.S. Herbaria, whose collections document the past 150 years of research on macrofungi, and that this alliance will digitize and share specimen data in support of a wide range of scientific and educational objectives. Why would I take this on? I'm not a mycologist. I am in charge of a very large collection of fungi, and my goal as director of the Herbarium of the New York Botanical Garden over the past 30 years has been to try to get as many of our 7 million specimens digitized as possible. So this is an opportunity that fits in with that. And as you know, most of you, I have a sort of an emotional connection to the fungi, familial connection to the fungi. And during the dark days of last October, when I was wrestling to assemble this over 500-page proposal, the thing that kept me going was really that I think my dad would have thought this was a cool project. So this is a map that shows the members of the consortium institutionally. There's several types. Most institutions are digitizing their own specimens. A few cases, the institutions are sending their collections elsewhere for digitization. And there are some participants who've already digitized all their collections, and all they're doing is really having to just give us a copy of the data. What made this project possible is an NSF program called Advancing Digitization of Biological Collections. Our grant was funded in the second round of this. It's meant to be a 10-year project. They will award their last funds in 2020, so actually it'll extend to 2013. And the objective is to digitize as many of the collections in the United States of all types as possible in service of research. I'm going to take a minute to tell you how this came about. I think it's instructive for a number of reasons. Back in the waning years of the Bush administration, some official, and I have known who it was, but I can't remember, noticed that federal funds were going to federal collections, but there wasn't a particularly good accounting of what those collections were and how they were used. So a congressional subcommittee brought the federal agencies who had charge of collections. These are not just biological collections, but all collections, one by one in front of Congress to account for them. And they learned quickly that there was not only a pretty poor accounting, it was hard to find information about these specimens. There was an awful lot of data stored there, and that these data were hidden from use and were not being utilized. This led to a report, the Scientific Collections Mission Critical Infrastructure for Federal Science Agencies. This was meant to lead to greater support for the federal collections. Now, National Science Foundation was one of the federal agencies called. Of course, they don't have collections, but they fund a lot of collections. So they said, for our contribution, why don't we survey the collections that we fund and find out what they have and what they need? So they conducted a parallel survey. Many of you in here may have answered that survey. And the findings were similar. Lots of collections, under-resourced, data hidden, and digitization was more or less pointed out by everyone as what they wanted to expose the data that they held in their collections. About this same time, NSF produced a new strategic plan, which had all the happy kind of blah, blah, blah that any strategic plan does. But underlined at the end, a specific recommendation was a close coupling of research, infrastructure, and discovery. And this was all NSF bio programmers, program officers needed to say, aha, this is an opening in the door for the digitization and exposure of these dark data, the collections data. So in early 2010, a group of us came together to discuss, we were charged by NSF, how would you go about digitizing the nation's collections in the next 10 years? So we came up with a white paper, we blogged about it, and people responded. In April, we published a strategic plan, and NSF program started the following August. It's hard to believe, you know, I mean, you can't, it goes to show there's no, you never discount luck and the forces, you know, aligning, but also that it pays to kind of read these strategic reports and plans and look for nuggets that really could bear on what you want to do. So back to our project, what groups are included in macrofungi? It's basically is a very loose definition. One of the rules of the ADBC program is it isn't supposed to be clade-based. And of course, you know, there's clades and there's clades, but we wanted to make sure that it included both ascomycetes and agaricomycetes, or whatever you guys call them these days, so that we could claim that this was not, you know, a clade-based thing, that it was more, that macrofungi we defined as anything with a conspicuous fruiting structure, and you can define conspicuous however you want. It's not really that important. We want people to do as much as they can of these sorts of fungi. And many of you in this room helped develop these hypotheses that we said could be tested with this data set. That the more we know about macrofungal diversity, more we'll know about interrelationships in ecosystems in general. That fruiting times of macrofungi are likely to be altered by climate change, and this will have effects not just on the fungi, but the organisms they associate with. And that fungal species of interest or concern, the spread of them or their movement can be tracked through documentation by herbarium specimens. So what are the activities we're going to carry out in this project? We are going to digitize specimens and ancillary data. We're going to disseminate these data through the Mycology Collections portal. We're going to partner with the Citizen Mycology community for research and education, hopefully raise awareness about fungi in students and the general public, and collaborate with other projects. I'll say more about these individual activities now. The bulk of the effort will go into this monumental task of digitizing all these specimens. Now, already, when I say digitizing specimens, I mean sort of two things. It means taking the data from the label and putting it into a searchable, you know, machine electronic form. It's what we used to call databasing, but you know, that sounds so passé. And so there are already existing about 600 database records of fungi, and we are going to add about 700,000 such records to this for a total at the end of about 1.3 million. Digitizing also means taking pictures of the specimens. Now, of course, you know that specimens, mushrooms and other macrofungi mostly change pretty drastically when they dry. And you could argue, in many cases, a picture of a dried mushroom isn't very useful. However, in some cases it is. It can tell you the state of preservation of that collection, whether or not it's worth borrowing it to examine further. And in the case of some large fungi, you can see some surface detail that's useful. However, we're going to leave that to the discretion of the institutions. We're asking them to digitize 10% of their holdings, and they can choose whether those are their types, vouchers of some sort, unusual things, whatever they think will photograph well. It's their choice. We are also, as you also well know, that it's important with these specimens that, you know, since they do change so drastically, that we digitize the ancillary data that supports those, such as the photographs and field notes, drawing sketches, spore prints, all of that stuff. And so in this process, we're going to digitize about 145,000 slides, photographic slides of specimens. That, you know, these are ones where you can link the slide to an actual collection number. We are going to digitize about 26,000 field book pages. Two reasons for this. The first is that field books are archives and are often, I find, treated kind of casually. They should be preserved and they should be made accessible. A copy of all of the field books we digitize will go to Smithsonian, who has a field book archiving project. They'll also be then for the individual collectors to have in case disaster strikes. But we will also use those data in record creation. We've discovered at New York that we can very effectively create records for specimens using field books. I'm not going to go into that now. I'll be glad to tell you more about that individually if you'd like to hear it. And then also we figure there are about 350,000 field books and spore prints that will also be digitized, and all of these then will be linked. I'm not going to say much about our strategy for this, but it involves several different sets of players. The institutions will create preliminary records, which is basically just they'll put a barcode and put the specimen number, the name the specimen's filed under in a table, and then they will image all the things they're supposed to do and create field book records. And they will then, that data then will come to the New York Botanical Garden. We're the center for training and support, but we also will create records from the data provided. A little bit of magic going on there. Again, I'd be glad to talk to you more about it. I will say this is an area of very active research at the moment, and we're quite encouraged that we can create records at a far, far faster rate, maybe a tenfold rate than over what we could by just the old-fashioned typing in. And then, once that's done, these data will be exposed to the community through the Myco portal, where there will be the specimen records, links to all of the ancillary data. At this point, the data will be available for use, including editing and augmentation, and using these data for various projects. I'm not going to say a lot about the Myco portal, because I suspect Scott will talk more about it in his presentation. But it's powered by Symbiota, which is software which is used, I think, by about 19 different projects. The Southwestern CINET, which is plants and animals of the Southwest, the bryophyte and lichen portals. And what Symbiota does very well is allow you to search across collections to find out, across collections what organisms they hold. And it has a host of other features as well. Scott Bates was responsible for creating this, and he started working on it last summer, I guess. And as of June, we already have close to 300,000 records in there, so we're well underway getting the data that already exists imported, but that's obviously a very high priority. So in addition to being just able to search for collections, Symbiota has a host of other features. It will show the ancillary items with the specimen record. You can create maps, you can create checklists, and you can create keys. All you have to do to use it is just register. You also can use it for just observations. If you go on a foray and just want to make a list of the things you found, you can just enter that. So it's very flexible, very easy to use, and it's open to anyone to create a project of whatever size, whether it's the fungi in your local park to whatever else you might want to do with it. So a very key part of this project is the partnership with the Citizen Mycology community. And we're having a little bit of a debate in my shop about the name. Citizen Mycology, well, Gene Yetter, who came to us, who's part of my staff, but who came to us from the amateur mycological community, he didn't like Citizen Mycology. He thinks it sounds sort of overly politically correct or even a little Orwellian. He sees nothing wrong with amateur, given the root of the Latin word. It's certainly nothing, we all love these plants. But I would be curious what other people think. But to me, amateur sounded, to some people sounds pejorative. And certainly, it certainly doesn't seem to recognize the scientific contribution made by so many of the people in this room. So anyway, so we've got Citizen Mycology for now. This is a slide, I don't need to tell you what citizen mycologists do, but I do tell other audiences, and I will say that other people in the collections community are absolutely fascinated by you guys, and they would love to have groups like you and to learn from what you do, what you get out of it, what you contribute, so you're really quite an active area of interest, especially the role that you play in outreach to the broader community. And so what we want to enlist the citizen mycologists to do is to help guide the project by serving on our advisory board, to, hopefully you'll go in and edit and augment records, in the dead of winter when there's no fungi out. Maybe you'd like to go in and help us correct and improve the records. We would like you to use the portal to document your findings in any way that you choose. And if you find it's not sufficient yet to document what you want to do, tell us and we'll see if we can improve it. And we also want you to create content for, or at least lead us to content you've already created for our crowdsourcing application, which is a way that we're going to try to get people even outside your own community, other people who just like to play on the computer to join in this effort. I'll say more about that in a minute. But so when we say help us edit and complete data, I just sort of give an example. So on the far left is a specimen where there is a label and it has been transcribed, but there are no coordinates on it. But maybe there's a person out there who knows exactly where this was collected. What does it say? Santa Cruz Mountains, anyway, there's a locality. There may be somebody who'd like to, to figure out exactly where that was, or at least give their best guess and put in the coordinates. On the right here, we won't, there'll be a limit to what we can capture. We really won't capture a lot of that habitat data. We'll capture what it is and where it grew and who collected it and when. But there's some handwriting there. It talks about where it was collected, and if someone wanted to go in there and type it, maybe it's illegible and we couldn't read it and got it wrong. You know the handwriting. You can go in and improve it. Now, you might wonder whether or not there are really hordes of people out there who would like to do nothing more than look at specimen labels and correct them. And I will admit that this is one of the aspects of this project that keeps me up at night. But then I teamed up with these guys. Vizzuality is a company, basically it's two guys, who are very enthusiastic about crowdsourcing applications, and they have developed a number of them which are very successful. I pulled out 4 here. Old Weather, I'll say more about that in a minute. The NEMO mission, they take NASA photos of the seafloor and they look at them sort of one by one and they score the animals that they find there. They've done one about rare species in Europe, and then a new one which doesn't have anything to do with biology, but it has to do with endangered languages. And they have a knack for creating a creating a world. When you enter one of their websites, you sort of enter into a world where just the way it's designed and everything about it makes it very enticing to participate. I'll use Old Weather as an example. Old Weather is a project where they have a lot of old ship logs. This is mostly from England. And the ship logs contain daily readings about weather, but they're written by hand. They're usually numerical readings and long ledgers. This is important climate data, very, very specific important climate data. So what the volunteers in Old Weather do is they go in and they register and they transcribe from the handwriting, they type in the values. And that's got to be more boring than mushroom labels. But on the other hand, they have 28,000 different volunteer contributions to this. And among the things that they do, the more that you do, and you have to enter these things 3 times before they're accepted, and you get rated on how accurate your things are. But if you're a consistently good editor, you rise through the ranks. You start off as a seaman, and you can rank all the way up to admiral. And they form communities, and they discuss it. Another, the people actually apparently become very proprietary. And the biggest problem they're facing in this project now, they can't get the old ledgers digitized fast enough to keep up with the people who want to do it. So I figure, there are people out there who want to do this kind of thing. I don't feel entirely comfortable with just feeding that kind of mentality where people just are gaming and that's really all they're doing here. I mean, I think that's fine, and I'd rather have them work on fungal specimens than on shooting people, But on the other hand, I think there's a real opportunity through an enticing website to push these people to get more involved with natural history, and in this case, fungi. So what I'd love to see is to have links on our Vizzuality site that will say, here's some lectures at your local mushroom club. You got a little bit interested, go join, give them a try, and maybe if in return for letting us link to the content of the clubs, maybe the clubs will get some new members and some new participants. So that's what we hope. We also have a component that deals more with school kind of based education. This project will provide funding for about 60,000 hours worth of student labor across the coast, 60,000 hours of student labor across the entire project. And in addition to beer money, those students will have the opportunity to learn something about fungi in a sort of an informal way with their advisors, who hopefully will do what they said they would do and put some context to them, take them on tours of the lab. If it's mushroom season, take their student workers on a walk, and provide some context to it. We also want to develop a community of student workers, not just with this project, but join them to a larger community of students working in museums through social networking. This has already started. There are already groups where kids put up, oh wow, did you see this label? I couldn't read this handwriting, and someone else comes on, and it's cross vertebrate zoology to entomology, and I think this would be a great way for them to see some relevance to what they do, to share their knowledge, and for networking, and they like to do it anyway. And we also, for those students, undergraduates, who are particularly keen and would like to give a formal presentation, we have funds to send several of them every year. They can go to an MSA meeting, to Spinach, which is the Society for the Preservation of Natural History Community, or they can go to a foray and give a presentation there. Another component of the project, and this is being taken care of by Mark Kubetta at NC State, is we will have a couple of workshops for high school students and encouraging them to use fungi in the classroom. The first workshop will be held at NC State, and the second one will be held in conjunction with the MSA meeting, wherever it's going to be held in 2014. And hopefully then, science, high school biology teachers have very little time in the classroom when they could use fungi, but they're aware of that. We're going to try to make some discrete lessons that they could invoke in the time that they have. We obviously want to link the data here to a whole host of other projects. Each institution just owes us a copy of the data. They can do whatever they want to with other copies. They can supply them to whatever projects they want to. Of course, we will share data with GBIF, and in any connections we can make to any other project, to EOL, to Mushroom Observer, we are more than open to doing so. In fact, we'll consider it a failure if we don't. The last bullet there, Worldwide Macrofungi Collections Portal, ? I'm really hoping that this is a project that will go global. Canada, I know already there's some interest in a parallel project. And actually Brazil, I was invited to a meeting in Brazil in September where they're intrigued by this. Brazil's really big on biodiversity documentation, and I'm not able to go, but I'm sending someone to go. So, and I hope in Europe as well. So I would like this to be the beginning of something that is much bigger than just in the United States. Finally, we will be contributing to the National Collections Digitization Initiative. This ADBC program funded a hub for the whole project, which is at University of Florida. It's called iDigBio, which I personally hate, but I guess I'm getting used to. But iDigBio is going to build a giant repository for all these data, which won't exactly be another GBIF, but it eludes me a bit what the distinction is. But anyway, there'll be a place where you can go and get data, anyone can. But they also are serving as a clearinghouse for all sorts of techniques and tools and approaches. And I strongly urge you to go and register for their website, read the blogs. If you're interested at all in digitization of natural history collections, there's a lot here, and there will be a lot more. They also sponsor and just a dazzling number of workshops and opportunities. And again, if you go and register, you'll learn about those. Please, please, please take advantage of some iDigBio activity, because fungi are very poorly representative. I am the sole representative so far of anything mycological at these meetings, and fungi will get left out if you don't participate. Very specifically, there's a citizens science workshop being held in September. They have they pay all of your expenses. If they up through Monday, they are still accepting applications. A citizen mycologist would be a rock star at one of these. So if one of you, has the time to go for a few days in September to this conference, just talk to me. I think you just send them an email and apply online, and you can go. Specifically, what I hope we can do for North America and Mycoflora project is obviously provide collections and ancillary data that are going to be needed to characterize taxa. and provide a repository for new specimens as they're gathered, as they inevitably will be. I hope it'll also be a tool for analyzing the gaps in collecting, in geography as well as taxonomy. And we do have the capacity to store descriptions and keys. I know that this is a wide open topic, but this is an area that could be explored further if you wanted to. And so I just want to say thank you. This is a list of the principal investigators and the advisory committee members. We would love to have more participation from the amateur community in the advisory committee. If you're interested, please talk to me. But thank you to all of you who participate in this, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So thank you.